All right, hi all and welcome. I'm Anthony and this is Any News Australia, where we focus on the issues that concern small business in this country and try to better understand aspects of business, law and the economy by providing a measured approach with our expert guests. I'm not a lawyer, I'm not a doctor, I'm not a journalist either, I'm just a small business owner myself. So any views or opinions you hear on our show are not to be taken as legal advice or medical advice, they're just as a guide. And you should consult your legal team, AFL Solicitors in this case, or the Law Society to receive proper advice regarding your particular situation before taking any action. So with that, let's welcome our guest today, who's Tony Nikolic, Managing Director of AFL Solicitors. How are you today, Tony?
Good evening. How are you, Anthony?
Good. I'm really well, and thanks a lot for making the time to join with us today. I know you're very busy, but I'll go through a little bio for people who don't know much about you. Tony Nikolic is a practicing lawyer in Sydney, and prior to becoming a solicitor, he worked as a contractor with the Australian Institute of Criminology on the drug use monitoring program in Australia, and was based in numerous police stations around New South Wales. In 2014, Tony was a contributing author to the International Handbook of Whistleblower Research, with an emphasis on globalizing incentive-based laws modeled off the United States False Claims Act. In 2017, Tony drafted a submission to the Australian Senate about improving whistleblower laws to address corporate fraud and recommended that Australia follow the United States in eradicating fraud against the taxpayer. The work in this area involves submissions, working with Australian Federal Police and both major political parties in conjunction with late Professor Faunce of the Australian National University in Canberra. During the crisis of the COVID crisis, Tony opened his own law firm with the aim of bringing truth and transparency to the clearly one-sided media representations and censorship that appeared to be globally coordinated. On 7th July this year, he released a 29-page open letter to politicians in the state of New South Wales with the aim of bringing transparency to facts that were being censored by the mainstream media. This letter raised a number of factual scenarios that should be made available to the public, especially those facts relating to serious adverse events, including deaths and the stealthy push to mandate vaccine across the population with a vaccine passport to follow. And is added, the censoring of doctors and medical professionals should not occur in a liberal democracy, period. So that's quite an intro, that's quite a CV, Tony, and welcome to the show.
Appreciate it. Thank you.
So I'd like to note that I haven't known you for very long at all. So a few weeks back, I was reading an article that mentioned your name, and then a couple of days later, I watched a YouTube news clip that you were in as well, and I was quite intrigued. I guess from my perspective, when you see everyone running in one direction, if you see a few people running the other way, then they tend to stand out. And so, that day I reached out on LinkedIn. I think an hour later or something, we had a telephone call, and well, now we're here. But before we get into the court case, I wanted to know a little bit about your legal views. I guess even with that intro that you supplied, the casual observer could find some of your legal views a little extreme or a little bit controversial. So how did you establish some of these legal viewpoints, and would you consider them to be legally controversial in nature?
Not at all. I would have thought they were quite normal, to be quite candid with you. The issues that are covered really have to do with transparency and non-censorship. I can't see, and with the utmost respect to you, or anyone really, I can't see what's controversial about asking someone to provide an objective view. The fact that doctors are being censored just by providing medical information about possible alternatives. That's something that's occurred for hundreds of years. We have known antivirals that have been out there in some cases for 30, 40 years before the onset of COVID, and yet for some reason they were pushed to the wayside, and any doctor that came up and said, hey, we can use this sort of medication to assist people, and there are potential benefits. Now, I'm not giving medical information here, but if that is the case and they are being censored, then I can't see anything controversial. All I can see is doctors standing up saying we can potentially save a lot of lives here, and not introducing it obviously is the controversial part. That's my view, because
Yeah.
if we're imperiling the lives of Australian citizens by not using something that is better than nothing, because that was the approach that has been taken. We used nothing and absolutely nothing until the vaccine was developed. And in that time, there were a few deaths. I would say in the last 18 months since COVID, just over 1,000, don't quote me, let's say 1,200 vaccines come out. We're well over, and that's only in the last 6 months. There's linkages, and this is on the TGA's own website, suspected coincidental linkages of well over 500 deaths with well over 45,000 adverse reactions. And that's something that's not controversial to me, because if you're going to stick something into someone, shouldn't they know the truth? Shouldn't they know these numbers? That's not controversial. They should be well aware of this. And how can you give informed consent? Informed consent is an obligation. It's both, it's legal, professional and ethical obligations that doctors and medical staff have towards patients. Not doing that that's controversial.
Yeah, I guess there's a lot of people that would agree with you, but there's also some that's to take the other side as well. But so if you don't mind, I'll be asking you to clarify some of your points and statements as we go through the interview, for my own understanding and also for our viewers. So we'll get into the court case. I know it's an active case, so there might be some some things you can and can't talk about. But for those who haven't been following it, can you let us know what it's all about first of all, and then what the status is and where things are up to.
Yeah, as you said, it's presently before the courts. It's certainly something that I can't delve into too far. Again, it's I guess that's for the benefit of why we go to court. We let the courts decide. Essentially, it goes down to the lawfulness of the directions with respect to both the law and the directions, public health directions mandating classes of workers. And we also look at the constitutional aspect of the higher order stuff relating to the National Cabinet. I won't delve too much further into that because, as I said, I think it's the opportunity for the courts, and that's why we're there. It went so far as to say is that many letters were written to politicians over the course of 18 months. Very few, if any, were actually attracted a response, and no responses from either major party. We're talking over an 18-month period, which was really concerning, especially in a participatory democracy, right?
Yeah, I mean, so are you proposing in this case that public health orders may not be entirely valid?
Well, to an extent, what we're saying is there was no power, okay? I won't, like I said, I really can't go too much further into that. I understand that you might be curious, and I just won't take that any further. Okay,
sure, no problem. We'll move on and keep us informed of any progress that you can there. We'll move on to the employer rights and obligations with regards to vaccine mandates. So I know many of our clients seem rather confused about some of the information being shared through various sources. So I wonder, for those employers who are wanting to introduce mandatory vaccinations for their staff, can you clear the air a little on how they should best handle it? I mean, for those that want to do it.
Oh, for those that want to do it, I would suggest you do your reading. Do you really want to mandate something that is known to have a health risk? Not only a health risk, but there are clearly, not just here in Australia, but globally, there's people dying. If that's an employer's decision to mandate it, then the employer really needs to understand that the Act, in particular, say the Work Health and Safety Acts, relevantly provide that a worker may cease or refuse to carry out work if the worker has, on reasonable grounds, concern that carrying out the work would expose the worker to a serious health risk or safety concern emanating from an immediate or imminent exposure to a hazard. That's the law. I can't see any employment contract. Remember, contracts can only go to the extent of a valid law, right? So if there are deaths, and we know there are deaths because that's conceded, and it's not just here in Australia but elsewhere, then I would have thought that every employer out there better think twice.
And so, but I heard recently about Scott Morrison, saying words to the effect that businesses will be indemnified. Can you speak to your understanding on that?
Well, Mr. Morrison has said a lot of things. The Prime Minister has said a lot of things over the course of this. So again, they may be the subject of what goes before the courts, right? And I won't take that any further, but I would have thought that, let's just take a look at this, right? If the government's not responsible for the injection, the pharmaceutical companies aren't responsible for the injection, the doctors aren't responsible for the injection, your employer's not responsible for the injection, but if you agree to take it, then you're responsible. That to me tells you a lot. That to me tells me a lot, because you wouldn't indemnify someone if you didn't think there was something wrong.
I guess that makes sense from a legal standpoint. So then for employees, that understanding some of this and sort of taking your points, not wanting to receive the vaccine, is there a one-size-fits-all approach depending on the industry, or what can they do, or should they just start looking for another job?
Oh, look, I think that health decisions are something that need to be taken up between the patient and a doctor. I can't, as a lawyer, I have a clear boundary. I don't give medical advice, although whether someone wants to take another job, if they're going to do it now, and everyone should just do it now. If that's the case, if whatever industry you're in, if it means that's what your employer's saying and they're giving you notice, get up and walk now. Because it's not them initiating that, that's something that's being imposed upon them, so they're being pushed. Okay, so everyone leave now. And if you do that, then really what are you going to do? I think that's a very scary proposition, to be quite honest with you. It's not certainly not desirable. I would have thought the business community and government would come together and actually understand that there are alternatives here if they actually sat down and looked at it. Because just let me ask you this. If, let's say, 200 firefighters left each state, okay, walked out. We'll just give an example here. Let's say, 200 police officers from each state left. Let's say 200 paramedics from each state left. Let's say 500 nurses from each state left tomorrow. Who's going to go in there and take care of your children, your family? Because that's really what's happening here. Who's going to do that? Let's say all construction workers got up and left tomorrow. Let's say all your employees and business employees left tomorrow. Not only are you going to take a big hit in terms of profit, but think about the safety concerns that really weren't initiated by the people. The people didn't do it. They were told, this is your choice or leave. And so if they all got up tomorrow and left, that would bring Australia to its knees. And that's not desirable.
Yeah, no, I hear what you're saying. What about those? I mean, I've spoken to quite a few people from the employee standpoint too, looking for ways to challenge their employers on some of this. Is there legal grounds for challenging some of these mandates that come through, in your opinion?
Absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. I think there are. There are a number of things. You find me right now, the pharmaceutical companies, the government, the TGA, no one can tell you really the short-term clinical trial hasn't finished. That means the mid-term hasn't even started, and the long-term we're nowhere near that, because these things can take between 5 to 12 years. Okay, because typically that's how long it goes. So how can an employer or anyone say you must take something when no one really knows what's there? What we do know is the Freedom of Information documents that I have clearly state they really have no conclusive evidence as to the effects of the vaccines on fertility. They're saying a lot of things, but they can't say whether it does or not. But there are clinical trials that were leaked out of Japan, okay, that show there were effect on fertility because the spike protein is being found in the ovaries of females, okay? The carcinogenicity, well, we don't know about the carcinogenicity of it. Are they toxic in terms of, do they provide a carcinogenic property? Well, you wouldn't know that. No one knows that. Your employer wouldn't know that. And in terms of genotoxicity, well, if they're mRNA, then are they manipulating your genes in any certain way? Well, we're being told a lot of things, aren't we? But we're not really given any conclusion. But what we do know is the documents are all black when it said what are the effects on humans. Okay, that right. We have.
So there's a lot of stuff being redacted.
Yes, and that's the point. That's the point we're trying to say here is that at what point do people think that understanding that what we're doing is really saying open up, be transparent, be honest with the Australian people? I can't see what the controversy is here.
So we'll move on to contractors. So, you know, those people who are legally contractors, not employees by definition, but still, you know, act and behave, although as an employee like fashion in their regular day work. Do they have options on this, or are they sort of bound by different rules and regulations?
Well, again, whether it's an employee contract or a contractor, remember the contract is only valid to the extent of a statute, right? So if there's a statute out there, like the one I was giving you an example of, and remember, if I could just, like you were saying at the start, if I could just say every case is different. So I'm not giving legal advice. I don't want people to run out there and, you know, hey, don't do this or you can't do that. I'm not. I think you just need to see, like, I think that was very wise what you did at the start, Anthony, in the sense that it's not medical, it's not specifically tailored legal advice because every case will come across differently. But in terms of what I was saying earlier, I think it's very important that we understand that. And again, I think the employers really need to understand, and so everyone really needs to understand this, is that if you impose something upon someone and they die or they are critically injured and have a long-term consequence, okay, number one, you need to live with it because you made that decision, okay? You need to live with it, okay? And not only live with it internally, which I would have thought any legally obliged moral and ethical person would find it difficult to cope, to say that I forced that person to take this. Now, the level of adverse events globally are quite significant, okay? They're not made up, they're not conspiracies, and they're not anti-vaxxer things, because I can assure you of one thing. Most of the people, if not very close to all of them, are people who are vaccinated yearly or annually with various vaccines. This is the one they don't want, okay? So these socially constructed, oh, you're an anti-vaccine, that's just, again, it's like a schoolyard bully saying, if you don't eat my favourite flavoured ice cream, okay, you're an absolute goose, okay? That's what this is, okay? Putting other people at danger. Well, if the vaccine was that good, okay, and you didn't take it, how can you be affecting them? Number one. And number two, we know it doesn't stop you from getting the virus. We know it doesn't stop you from transmitting it, okay? So you mandating it, you're actually mandating taking the virus in, because we already know they're the two factors that are existing, okay? They're facts, okay? And if that is the case, then you also need to consider the other side of the coin, that if it's not stopping you from transmitting it, then where does it stop in the sense that if it does reduce your symptoms, which is now the argument, because everything's changed, because it said that that's the golden bullet, then the goalpost changed, and the goalpost changed again. So you now experience somewhat of a less symptoms. Now you take that into your workplace. Take that now against and opposed to, say, someone who's unvaccinated. They say, oh gosh, you know, I've got swollen glands, or gee, I'm not feeling well. Okay, that's the unvaccinated. They know I'm not going to work today, just like when you got a terrible flu. Gee, I better not go to work. I don't want to put my colleagues at risk. But the person who's vaccinated actually takes it in there, doesn't know they're spreading it. Okay, now the employer's mandating it and the government's mandating it. What we're saying is you're the one taking it. If you have a look at since the rollout, there seems to be this increase, isn't there? There's an increase. And that increase seems to be coinciding with the rollout of the vaccines. Because when we had the Alpha, in which there was no vaccine, and Alpha variant back in 2021, there was no vaccine, and it was almost 4.33 times more deadly than the Delta variant. There was no vaccine. We got through, didn't we? It's evident. You lived it, I lived it, we've seen it. There weren't people dying on the streets. Okay? There weren't. These are just the facts. And now that with what's happening here, we're seeing an increase, but that increase seems to be coinciding with the rollout.
Interesting. Yeah, I guess we'll talk more about that in future episodes. But just on the other side of the argument now too, if someone has COVID, goes to work, makes someone else at work sick, and then and maybe they get ill or even worse, is the employer or is that person liable for any of that outcome?
Are they vaccinated?
No, in this case, no.
Okay, well, first we need to work out, and I appreciate your answer. First, you need to work out whether they're vaccinated, because we know that's happening. If they're not vaccinated, then wouldn't it follow that you have to treat them both the same? If that was the case, you'd have to. You'd have to. You can't say that person, that person brought it in, we're going to treat them differently to that other person. If they didn't know they had it, then really it's hard to say. Again, it's one of those circumstances. But, look, if they're, just making it into work and, they're lethargic and, you know what I mean? Like, you're really sick.
Yeah. Obviously unwell. Yeah.
And you can see perhaps there may be something there, but you wouldn't be able to distinguish. Could you really distinguish that? You know what I mean? How would you do that? Like, we already know that you're transmitting it with it. So how do you distinguish where it came from in the first place? And was it already there? Okay, yeah.
Yeah, okay. So a lot of things to consider in that point. Yeah. So another one, if someone has a business and their customer or clients now require them to show proof of vaccine before continuing, how should this be handled by that business? I guess it probably depends on the type of business, but if you can speak broadly to that.
Yeah, broadly, I think it's the way I would have thought, and I've seen a lot of comments out there that don't serve the unvaccinated. If you're a business person and you know the facts about COVID, okay, because we do know the facts about COVID now, and it's not about being reckless or anything like that. You need to decide, and I've been seeing so many people in America and Europe saying, I don't care whether you're vaxxed or unvaxxed, you're welcome in my business. You are welcome, because we're not going to go back and hark back to the days of medical apartheid or apartheid and segregation. We can't go there, and that's where we're going to head. But what we're doing here, and we see politicians increasingly saying that don't serve people if they don't have a mask and don't serve people if they're not vaccinated. Well, that's just medical apartheid. That to me is we're now going to start creating, if you remember the 60s where there was toilets for blacks and whites. We left that a long time ago. Why are we coming back? Has anyone not learned from history here? Anyway, I look at it and I just say to myself, well, how can we have politicians screaming at medical apartheid, saying don't serve this? No, serve them. It's up to you. It's your choice. Okay.
Yeah. Okay. I mean, is that something to do with constitutional rights in that case, or what type of the medical apartheid scenario? What types of laws might that be breaking?
Well, you're looking at civil rights, aren't you? And you're looking at a number of issues. Obviously, you're also looking at the dignity of the human being too, right? Okay, you're looking at the dignity of that person. Are you going to treat them as a human being, or are you going to treat them because a politician said, don't do this? Really, I think you need to look within yourselves as human beings, and we all need to do that. We've lost touch of that. Okay, we've been told we can't hug our family. We've been told we can't talk to our family. We can't gather with our family. We can't even go into places of worship. We can't extend ourselves to our faith. We can't coordinate with our neighbours and get out there with our neighbours. So, when you've lost love, faith, hope, and you strip people of their work, which is everything that we've just been through in this little interview, okay, you've stripped people of their humanity, okay, because they're the very core parts of our humanity, okay, and we're being told don't do that. We're people, okay, we're social beings by character. You have a family and you're being told not to love them, you're being told not to hug them, you're being told not to comfort them, you're being told don't go to the hospital and comfort someone and perhaps in their last days. How have we come to this point? Sorry, but yeah, we need to really think.
You're making some very good points there. I'm sure a lot of the viewers might agree from that regard. I might just go to some questions that have come in from the audience. So what's the situation for business owners who have to pay rent but cannot enter their premises unless they are vaccinated? Is it legal? And how do they navigate through this?
Yeah, that would be a question I think we'd take on, on an individual basis, with an inquiry. But I think broad, specific legal advice, I would have thought there are a number of remedies here. One is, are there any vitiating points with respect to that contract? Okay, so if the tenant, well, they certainly didn't create COVID, did they? Okay, so why would a landlord be holding that against the tenant? And no, I think the Australian privacy principles relevantly state that you don't need to give out your because medical information is sensitive information. It rises a lot higher than confidential, okay, or private, okay. It's called sensitive, okay. So you don't have to give it out, okay. That would be as a very broad brushed approach. But I would have thought that it's the individual circumstance of the case that needs to be assessed here. I can't do that, without knowing the individual facts. But I would suggest, as you were saying, either seek the assistance of a lawyer. If you don't know one, contact your local law society. They are in touch with many lawyers, and there are great lawyers in Australia. So very proud to be a part of that collegial society.
Okay, yeah, that's great. That's great advice there for people to sort of go seek some professional help in that situation. There's another one that's come in about cafes and restaurants, and I guess retail shops in general that allow all to enter their premises. Can the owner of that premise be fined, and how valid are those fines, and can they be challenged?
Okay, if you're talking, sorry, just to clarify, are we talking that the person's not serving or serving?
In this case, allows everyone in, vaccinated and unvaccinated, into their shop, and they receive a fine for allowing everyone.
Oh, they're a hero, I reckon. They're not engaging in that segregation that I was talking about, number one. Everything can be challenged, right? I think, we need to come back down to common sense, approaches to things. Like I said, if you look in Europe and America, you're starting to see business. Even in Australia, we're starting to see you're welcome. I don't care if you're vaccinated or unvaccinated, because people can see what the reality of COVID is. Okay, you've got to go behind the media hype. Okay, now, and I will say, for instance, we've had Sky News. Ben Fordham came out the other day, he's pro-vax. Let's face it, Ben Fordham is pro-vax, but he came out and he gave some glaring statistics about the way we're treating this. Okay, we need to open up. There are too many suicides. I walk through the city and that, because my office is in the city, I see full lease. They're empty. It's a ghost town. It reminded me of when I went to Los Angeles some years ago and went into the place called Lancaster, and you see the tumbleweed. Remember from the old westerns, the big rolls of tumbleweed? I was just waiting for tumbleweed because it was like a ghost town. And I said to myself, is this our city? And you know what have we got? 1,200 deaths. I think we've got 13,333 per month. Don't quote me on that. Depends where you get your statistics. Roughly on that, that's about 79,900 a year. Okay, or sorry, over 6 months. Sorry, I should say. My apologies, my maths there. And we've got 1,200 with COVID. But we've got in the same period of time. That's over 18 months. But in 6 months, we've got 79, close to 80,000 deaths. What's happened to them? What about the suicides? Where did they go? What about these kids and the young adolescents that are committing suicide? Where are these people? Why are they not numbers here? Because they are what we call the shadow pandemic. Okay? They are in the shadows and they are being kept in the shadows. No one wants to know about these people. But these are exceeding, far exceeding COVID.
Yeah. Wow. Yeah. It doesn't get talked about a lot on the mainstream about the shadow pandemic at all. But just another question we've got here. From a student perspective, they're partway through a 4-year degree and have been told they will not receive placement without the vaccine. What can they do as a student?
Yeah. I had a young lady, a nurse, and I really feel sorry for these students, to be quite candid with you, is that she paid $120,000, almost finished her nursing degree. She had 2 weeks to go, as a matter of fact. Anyone done a master's, there's a lot of hard work, a lot of sleepless nights, and sometimes those sleepless nights are self-induced because you party the night and you come home and you rush and you're putting your essay together for the next day. But we've all been there. So but 120,000, and in 2 weeks out, you're told you can't graduate and you can't get your license. And or what about the ones who have just come out and done their license and finished? And what about the ones that have been out for 10, 15 years? Okay. And they've got their license, they've done all their studies, and all this has changed. Well, I would have thought that the contracts in these areas, like I said, how can you contract someone to do something in circumstances where the issues have changed, and now you want to change their whole life? Well, you should be giving all their money back, and you should be giving everyone their money back. Okay, all right, because you didn't tell them that at the start.
Yeah, good point. So just another question here regarding just some clarity on, employer mandates. So if an employee is coerced into receiving a mandate, they experience an adverse reaction, what's the likelihood of being able to seek compensation from the employer?
Oh, there are many ways to skin a cat. I think it comes down to, that's why we're lawyers, right? There are many ways. Like I said, the fact that we're starting to see indemnity, that's telling you there's something wrong. If that doesn't tell you there's something wrong, because they're not giving it to car manufacturers for airbags, are they? They're not giving it to car manufacturers if the wheel falls off while you're driving down the road. There's something, and they know there's something here. Okay, Greg Hunt literally came out and said this is the biggest clinical trial in world history. So, I'm amazed people haven't picked up on that, but we'll see. There's a lot there. People just need to enlighten themselves. I think Denzel Washington once said that if you don't listen to the news, you're not informed, but if you do, you're misinformed. Okay, and I think that wraps up where we're at, because if you encapsulate all that, what we've encountered throughout this is the lack of transparency, right? Okay, we've encountered the lack of, and anyone that just asked, hey, what's happening, they were put down, they were ridiculed, they were attacked. So Schopenhauer's 3 stages of truth, right? So, you're attacked, ridiculed, and then we're coming into truth. That's what I'm saying to you, okay? We're coming to truth. It may take a bit of time, but the truth is coming, okay? And everyone that did the attacking and the ridicule, they're being called out, okay, and they're going to continue to be called down. We're starting to see law firms starting to rise. Okay, yes, I was the first one out there, and yes, I have been in this space for quite some time. But I'm really encouraged. I'm absolutely encouraged to see that, I filed that Supreme Court action, then someone came in behind me, then a third person. Now today we've seen another person, then we've seen another person, and I just heard today again another person's filed. And again, not that long ago, maybe half an hour, I've heard in another area someone else has filed. I have support from, ex-QCs, barristers, retired, practicing. I have lawyers coming on board. Yeah, like I said, that third stage, Schopenhauer's stage they're starting to show. And for those who are saying, oh, it's a conspiracy and they're anti-vaxxers, it's silly. Well, we'll see.
Yeah. Okay. Look, I'm just conscious of time, and we've covered a lot of ground. But I'll just close with one more question. So for gyms in particular, and yoga studios and the like, and hair salons and the rest, who are interested in opening to everyone, and it seems like there's a bit of concern here about how they should do it without drawing attention or without receiving fines or being harassed by police and all of that kind of stuff. What suggestions might you have for those businesses and those business owners?
Well, there are a few. I'm certainly not going to encourage rebellion or anything like that, but you can go. Now we're coming into good weather in Australia, aren't we? So you can go outside, keep your 1.5 metre rule, do your body pump class or yoga or, Pilates class, take them outside. I really can't see the logic in why you would be closing them down, because you put some good ventilation. Remember, fitness, good diet, all that sort of stuff that a lot of the people going to gyms, that's really good for you. If anything, that'd be helping you to fight COVID and to go against it. Okay, now you put it in a well ventilated area, and you put some air filtration system in there, and you're keeping fit. Okay, remember, because obesity is another key risk factor. Notwithstanding that most of the people who are dying of COVID, and every death, let me tell you, every death, I don't care how old or how young, it's a tragedy and it's hurting somebody somewhere. Okay, it really is. But the majority of the people are comorbidities. Okay, with and of the older, 80, around about the 85-year mark. Now, I'm not saying it makes it any easier. It doesn't make it any easier. But when we look at it, I think we need to contextualise and put things into proportion. We're destroying lives. We see the family courts are full of divorce and pressures on money. We're seeing kids being torn apart. Where's mum? Where's dad? There's just, what have we got? 1,200 deaths. Yeah, and then contextualise that with the 79,900 over 6 months. Anyway.
Yeah. Okay. I think, look, thanks a lot for your time today. Do you have any closing comments on some of this? I know we're going to do probably a 12-part series, and maybe next week we'll talk about some other aspects of this. There's a lot of ground to cover. But, is there any final comments for today's show?
Yeah, two things, if I may. Three. One is read up. There's a lot of scientific literature out there. Okay, please read up. You can email me or one of my team. If I'm not available, Anthony, I've got one, Matthew Hopkins, who's with my staff. Great guy, very knowledgeable, knows his stuff. I'm sure he'll also make himself available to you. Thirdly, I want people to know a few things. Is that informed consent is something that is in your hands. You have that in your hands. Okay, you can. Because the doctors and that are being pressured by regulators to tell you one thing and one thing only, which is vax, and they're trying to deregister any doctor that's trying to give you the truth, then you can still say to your doctor, well, I don't want that. I want to go and see a specialist because we know that there are side effects. I want to go and see a specialist and make sure my body can handle it. Until that specialist gives you an all clear and does all the tests, then you should be exempt from any vaccine against your will. And there shouldn't be a mandate period. just shouldn't be there. We shouldn't be seeking an exemption. If I could just leave you with this, again, I said Denzel Washington earlier. Denzel Washington also said this: don't just aspire to wake up and go to work every day. Aspire to make a difference every day. Okay? And that's what we should be doing.
Mm-hmm. That's fantastic. Yeah, I think, I appreciate all of your efforts and what you're doing as well. It's fantastic. And thanks for spending the time today. It's good to know that you mentioned that there's other lawyers that sort of agree with some of your points here as well. But for anyone else listening, if you have, another lawyer with a different viewpoint too, we'd be interested to speak with them to make sure, we're hearing both sides of these arguments too. And look, I'd like to thank, before we close, all of the viewers. Thanks for your comments. You can continue the discussion online. Like, comment, and share. And tune in next week. I'd also like to thank my team of volunteers that helped put this together, and we'll continue to do the hard work to make sure small businesses are kept informed. Thanks again. Thanks, Tony, for your time.
Thank you.
And we'll
Thank you.
see you all.
Good night, everybody.
See you all
Take
next
care.
week.